I was left for dead. That's how my journey in entrepreneurship started. I left the corporate world and my finance and MBA degrees behind me to share my story. Welcome to That Entrepreneur Show, where resilience meets hustle. Let's build and learn from our guest now.
My advice is to have a plan, have goals, have a vision for where you're going to be, call it 5 years out. Have a bigger goal, have a longer range mission. And then that way, every year, you can have yearly goals that maybe are a step towards that long.
So we're back here, That Entrepreneur Show, going across the country with my new friend Larry here, who has something to celebrate today. Why don't you hold it up so we can start the show off?
Yeah, I just got the first copies of the new book, just came out, and it'll be available March 4th, but I got my first preview of the actual book in my hand. Pretty fun.
Congratulations on that, everyone. Writing with Authors. You're catching this show on a live preview. Writing with Authors goes live this weekend. Check out his journey in that book, how it came to life, and everything in between. But I have to thank you for stopping by today for another episode of That Entrepreneur Show, helping create this show in a meaningful way. And now we just keep going to a top 2.5% global show. So thank you for your support, and thank you to all the guests. And of course, today we've got a rock star joining us who now has become the chairman of Ware Malcomb. He's the author of his new book, but he has spent decades scaling his company into one of the top North America design firms, where he blends artistic insight with strategic prowess, and his impact earned him the recognition and nod as a top 25 most influential architect. Backing up in time here, did you always want to become an architect? Because I know you didn't wake up one day and now I'm top 25.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Vincent. It's always a pleasure. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I was very lucky. I think I was about 5 years old when I decided I really wanted to be an architect, and I didn't even know what an architect was at that point, but I knew I was fascinated with building design and how space was put together and how buildings were built and all of that sort of stuff. So I knew early on.
What was the first building you were able to complete out on your own company, first project?
Gosh. I think it was probably an industrial building and a retail building. Yeah, here. And it was an exciting project because I ran it and learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. I also worked on the 1984 Olympic Games here in Los Angeles, and that was a pretty cool early career project.
Let's talk a little more about that.
Yeah, so our firm was hired to design 3 of the venues back then and for the 84 Olympics, and I was really a designer in the firm. I had really just started with the company, and so I worked closely with our head of design, and they were really creative venues because they're temporary, really. And so it was really fun to work on the wrestling venue and the equestrian venue and things like that. It was pretty.
Did you get tickets to the Olympics?
Actually, no. Amazingly, I did not. Maybe my boss did, but as a junior designer at the time, I did not.
I had to ask, when you look back at those early experiences, you mentioned making some mistakes. What is a mistake or lesson learned you had during that time where you can inspire and hopefully help some young architects avoid that same mistake?
Well, there's a lot of technical and coordination mistakes that you can make working with different engineers and coordinating their work, that sort of thing, being closely aligned with planning and requirements from cities and the building code and that sort of thing. But, I think on a leadership standpoint, just, when you're young and inexperienced, I was pretty hard charging, and I probably was pretty hard on some people. And, I needed to learn to be more patient with people and let them do their work and collaborate a little more. So I had to learn that early on.
It is not easy to let go. He was a guy who wore every single hat, not just in the podcasting process, but in my company. So slowly letting go, I can certainly relate to that. What is a tip maybe you can relate to our audience who's at that point where they're starting to delegate, but they want to still do everything themselves? They're a little impatient because they know how they would do it in their process.
I talk a lot about delegation in my book, and, it is an art. You have to learn it. When you're trained as an architect, you're really not necessarily trained to lead people. And that probably goes for any profession. You do a good job and you get promoted, and all of a sudden you're managing people. And, the trap is you fall into, yeah, I can do it better and faster myself, so I'll just go ahead and do that. It doesn't benefit the team, and I think one of the big themes in my book is developing people all the time. Develop your number two, develop your replacement. And so putting trust and empowerment into people and taking time to teach them and mentor them is a much more effective way long-term to get a great team effort and great results. And so that's a big theme in the book for sure.
While we're on the topic of this book, what inspired you to write Layered Leadership?
I think the main thing is that over time I discovered I kind of see the world in layers. As an architect, we work in layers of three-dimensional space, but I extended that past, the physical built environment to sort of the natural environment and people's emotions and thoughts and lighting and sound and music. And so the way I think about layers is the way I came up with a lot of conceptual ideas that we turned into strategies to build our company. And so it's this idea of whole brain development, always learning, continuous learning, and drawing from inspirations that you have and adapting inspirations into creative strategies that you can implement to build your company. So that's sort of the main idea behind the book. And, there's several examples of how we've been able to do that throughout the book.
Thank you for sharing all that. Now I have to ask, who should read Layered Leadership? Who is the target reader?
I think anyone who is learning to be a leader, anyone who is trying to build a business or a company or a department or a nonprofit or any kind of an organization, I think could hopefully find some helpful information in this book.
I know there's going to be tons of it. And one of the things I know you dive into in this book and throughout your career is the innovative leadership techniques, where you learn how to and now effectively blend creativity with strategic thinking. Can we dive a little bit into that?
Sure. All of us are creative, even though sometimes we don't turn that part of our brains on. And so my mission is to have everyone try to think creatively as well as analytically. For example, I took a lot of inspiration, I guess, over my life from Leonardo da Vinci, who was the ultimate whole brain thinker. And he was very curious about an enormous number of subjects. And he was always trying to make himself better and learn about something that maybe he wasn't as strong at or good at. You think of him as an artist, but he was really also a military engineer, and he was a civil engineer, and he was an architect, and he was a great business developer. He had great client relationships that he maintained, kept himself in great shape and well-balanced as a person, bright, all those sorts of things. So there were an enormous number of kind of subjects that he took on and tried to round out who he was. And I drew a lot of inspiration from that and take examples from that. And then beyond that, there's a lot of concepts, metaphors, inputs that I've used and that I talk about in the book that we've then adapted to strategies to help our company grow.
And part of the growth you've had, you attribute a lot to the power of mentors and mentorship, legacy building. Who, or maybe not your first, I should say, but who was one of your first mentors? Let's show some love here. Maybe a lesson or a technique they taught you that really impacted your career and life.
Yeah, so my dad was definitely my best mentor, and he always taught me not to sweat the small stuff, and to keep my eye on the bigger vision and the bigger goals. And so he was great and amazing. The two founders of our firm, Bill Ware and Bill Malcomb, I learned tons from them about customer service and design and running a business. They were awesome mentors.
And through the mentorship, I opened the show with this. You're now the chairman of the company that was once your baby. Can we maybe talk about some advice for those entering this exit stage? I know there may be some overlooked areas in the whole process. So any wisdom you could share, our audience would love to hear.
Yeah, thanks. Well, having an exit strategy that you're actually going to execute on, it's like any strategy, you have to execute on it. Takes planning ahead of time. You have to empower people, mentor people, coach people, develop your successors, and you have to work on that for a long time. And I think a lot of business owners don't do that. They put it off, and they're uncomfortable with the idea that maybe somebody would take over their business. And so my philosophy was, yeah, we got to get these guys ready, get them trained, get them ready, and then put a plan in place and then execute. You have to just follow through and do it, and I think I spent some time in the book on the succession planning because it's very, very important, I think, for any business to keep it going and to keep people interested in staying around with opportunity.
Is there a technique that you found to keep employees sticking around? I love how you showed the vulnerability in the beginning where, hey, I needed to find more patience in the beginning as a new boss and figuring all that out. Once you finally weathered that storm, what are some things that you found to really boost that morale?
Well, I think having trust in people and giving them opportunity to prove themselves and let them fail. I think there's the empowerment part of this idea is very, very important, that you show people you trust them and you want them to succeed and you're there to help them. I think it is huge. And developing a collaborative, sort of one team culture in the company where we all help each other, I think is huge for them. But also understanding what their personal goal and professional goals are and helping them to realize those, I think is critical as well. And, those can't be words. You have to deal with it. You got to live it every day.
I love what you said there, letting people fail, letting them know that you have the support, but I'm giving you the trust to do it. I try not to put proverbial handcuffs on my workers, my teammates, I should say. I don't like using that word, where when there's a delegated assignment, I trust you're going to be able to do it in your own way. It may not be my way, and I've learned to recognize that because my way may certainly not be the best way. It might not be the top 10 way, but it works for me. So very, very important stuff you just shared. One thing we didn't talk about before when we are on the book, I know you're very open to giving an example of a practical exercise from this book. What do you have in store for us?
Let's see. There's several in here. The practical exercise that I talk about, and it involves Tinker Toys. I made these little spoke and wheel things to balance, and it's a symbol to balance. And, I have everybody put it together with long and short Tinker Toys that symbolizes what they're really great at and what they're not good at. We end up with a very unbalanced sort of a circle of Tinker Toys. And then we look at an ultimate sort of ideal version, which all the Tinker Toys are the same length and they're very well balanced. And it just kind of is an illustrative idea of the sort of Leonardo thing. It's like, okay, well, I know I'm not that good at pick one, X, so I'm going to work on that. I'm going to try to be better at it so that at least I have an understanding at it. Not going to change what you're strong at, what your strengths are, but it helps balance you out a little better and opens up your brain, I think, possibilities.
And it seems like this whole show, and here as I'm even going over the information sheet from before, possibilities, and you touched on it again, but you acted on those. You didn't just plan them, you had to follow through and do them. So that's very inspirational to me as an entrepreneur. And I hope all the other entrepreneurs listening and tuning in today, it's not going to be easy day in and day out, but you have to find a way to just keep going. He's big on resilience and leadership as well. But Lawrence, we talked about the past, the current, you got the new book. Everyone get on Amazon, buy that book. We'll revisit that at the end. What's now in the future? I like to do the 3 phases in the show: beginning, middle, what's next? What can you at least share? I know some might not be ready for public sharing, but what do you have for us?
Well, I'm excited about the future always. The next several months or so is all about the book at this point. We're launching March 4th, so there's a lot of activity related to that. But after that, I'm in my last 2 years of my buyout. So pretty soon at the end of 26, I'll be the chairman emeritus and I'll be officially retired from the practice. And so I'm going to continue to work on my art career. I'm continuing to do solo shows and around the country and in Europe and doing some commissions. So that's going on. I have a big commission that I need to work on at my alma mater at State University. So I'm going to focus on that after this book is all over with. And so I'm excited about that. And then, still looking for opportunities to help people and mentor people. I still have a lot of nonprofit work I'm doing. So I will continue with that as well. A lot of keep going for sure.
That's amazing. Well, I can't wait to see it all unravel. Which type of nonprofit work are you involved in? I'm just big on making sure my guests get the flowers and the light shed on everything they do.
Yeah, so for many, many years, I've been involved in my alma mater, Kent State University. So I've served on the foundation board there for, over 15 years, I think. Did a stint as chair. And then my wife and I, Sandy and I, just finished co-chairing a capital campaign there at Kent State University. $350 million campaign that we exceeded the goal. 382, I think, is what we raised. And that finished up at the end of June and continuing to be involved in there. And then locally here in Orange County, on the board at Orange County United Way. And I'll be taking over as board chair in July for a 2-year stint. And I also chair United to End Homelessness as part of that organization here in Orange County. And so we're working to house people and help solve the homeless crisis. And we've housed almost 1,200 people so far since we started that work in 2018. I stayed pretty busy with some of my nonprofit stuff as well.
Oh, well, I'm just putting in here the nonprofit future you have in the show notes. But before I let you go, and before we get your contact info, where to find this awesome book, if you can give one piece of advice, Lawrence, to any early stage entrepreneur who, as you know what it's like, is chaotic, mayhem, 24 hours a day at that point, what can you offer us?
My advice is to have a plan, have goals, have a vision for where you're going to be, call it 5 years out. Have a bigger goal, have a longer range mission. And then that way, every year, you can have yearly goals that maybe are a step towards that longer term goal. And I found that if you write these goals down and commit to them and work on them and look at them, your chances of success go way, way up. So that would be what I would advise for sure.
I can certainly resonate with that as I'm looking away here. For over December, I got myself one of those 3-month dry erase boards where you can wash it down, and my larger actualized goals on the right side. And I say actualized already because they're going to be manifested. I have to think like that and just keep growing the company slowly but surely. But it's all coming back to these great conversations where, in a way, I get coaching sessions every day when I do shows like this. I have incredibly successful entrepreneurs who take the time out of their day to inspire our audience. So I can't thank you enough for all you brought here today. Now, and I think I'll release this right around the book release. We'll talk after the show really quick. But when this is live, where can we find the book online? And then, of course, where can we get in touch with you to say hello and maybe talk about next steps?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, the book is being released March 4th. It's already up on all the normal book ordering platforms for pre-order, so you can find it there. Also, there's a website dedicated to the book. It's called layeredleadershipbook.com. So you can find it there, and there's blogs up there and pre-order and all that stuff, so you can find it there as well.
Thank you for sharing that, everyone. Be sure to connect with him. Check out his book. He has a lot of expertise that he poured into there. Stay on the lookout for his art shows, some nonprofit work. He's got his hands in a lot, so he could be a great resource for you depending on the sector. My name is Vincent A. Lanci, and I want to thank you so much for stopping by and keeping this show a top 2.5% global show. It started out planless to just grow my brand as a young entrepreneur, and now we're getting attracted by great entrepreneurs like Larry today. The show is on all podcast platforms, all social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, and leave a comment for our guest today. Today's sponsors are JohnFord.com with his Empathy Set and brand new Empathy app, Coming Alive Podcast Production.com, and TampaCW.com. With that, we're signing off Orange County to Pinellas County here in Florida. Thank you so much.